So if you watched my spoiler video from a few days ago going over the leaks for chapter 168, then you pretty much already know the events that happened in this week's chapter. Although you probably didn't know the exact sequence of events, you still knew pretty much down to the wire what happened in this chapter. But I still feel like this chapter was worth doing a review for after I got done reading it, just because by the time I finished reading the chapter, for the first time, I caught myself actually tearing up and almost on the very verge of sobbing, just because of how sad and how emotional this chapter was, which caught me off guard because of the fact that this chapter was no sadder. In fact, I would argue that the last chapter was a lot sadder than this one was, but just the way this chapter ended was such a beautiful goodbye to Witch and all the other characters that died during the war in the last arc, really caught me off guard and hit me in a way that I did not expect it to. So because of that, I felt that even if it is unconventional and I don't script it out like I usually do, I still wanted to at least talk in a short video going over the events of this week's chapter. Anyway, enough blabbering, let's just jump right into the chapter. So the chapter actually picks up with the OSI having a prayer council going over the fact that Jaguar died in the last arc, and we can see that for the most part, only Holly and Justice seem to really care about the fact that Jaguar is dead, and maybe Eraser, he does seem a little bit upset, and they even mention in this chapter that he's unusually quiet when he's usually very talkative in the bunch. But the rest of the members don't seem to be that upset by the fact that Jaguar is dead, and they're more concerned about moving on to the next assignment, which would be hunting down the remaining 4 members of the OSG. Now, they do tell Justice in this chapter that LZ is not a priority because of the fact that for the most part, she's not really a threat and she's only hostile when she's actually being chased, mostly by him. So if they just leave her alone for now, then they can focus on the other 3. But of course we know Justice, since he has such a strong connection to LZ and so much hatred towards her and anyone connected to her, he's not going to follow that order, especially since they don't technically outrank him. And it's during this meeting when we get the titles and the names for the remaining 3 members of the OSG that we don't know about. And I already went over them in the spoiler video for this chapter, so I'm not going to go too much into detail about them. But one thing I do want to talk about is Dead End Krill, the Titan of Eternal Darkness, because when they actually mention him, which he's the first one of the 3 they mentioned, we see Holly had this weird look on her face like she has some kind of connection to him. So more than likely when we actually do delve into him in the story, she's going to be heavily involved in that arc. And then of course we have Archbishop Saintfire, which I want to mention that in the spoilers they called him Saintfire Fox, but apparently this person's actually going to be Saintfire Nox. It's Nox, not Fox. And then of course God Agnolia, which is a much easier way to say the last name. I couldn't pronounce the last one at all, but it's God Agnolia, the Mother of Dragons, which I gotta say, out of all the silhouettes, this one looks the most badass, although I am a little disappointed. I know it fits with the aesthetic of Eden Zero, but I am disappointed that the dragon that they show in the background for her is a mechanical one. I was kind of hoping that maybe dragons might actually exist in this world like they do in Fairy Tail. And I mean, on the planet or in the cosmos that she rolls over, there could be a possibility that they actually do exist, and it's just that her ship is modeled after a dragon. But we'll have to wait to see. I am still hoping though that with her ability it's going to be something similar to Jaguar's, where she can possibly turn into a dragon hybrid. Now what's interesting about this meeting is that not at any point do Justice or Eraser bring up the fact that Ziggy was involved in this last arc. So they're keeping this quiet from the rest of the OSI for some reason. And I can't honestly understand why they would want to hide someone as powerful as Ziggy, who's obviously becoming a huge threat in the cosmos, from the rest of their teammates. And Justice doesn't give a clear answer to that in this chapter when Victor actually confronts him about it. And speaking of Victor, we actually have him talking to Justice about the fact that Creed died and how they're dealing with it. And it's actually Victor who brings up the fact that the story that Jesse tells him about how Creed died doesn't seem to completely add up. And he's obviously having doubts about whether or not it's true or not. And then this is when we get the flashback of Jesse telling Justice and Victor what happened to Creed. And during the flashback we see that the Eden Zero crew do send Creed's body back to Justice on his ship. And we find out that it was actually Hermit who sent the pod that he was in, along with a message detailing what exactly happened to Creed. And as soon as they find out that the pod's on its way, and as soon as it lands on their ship, Jesse immediately runs to it and deletes the message. So he is trying really hard to cover the tracks or the fact that he was the one that killed Creed. And we see in this chapter that obviously, like I said, Victor is very suspicious of him and doesn't fully trust in his detailed report about what happened. And just as he's raising suspicion and Justice actually is starting to somewhat sway to Victor's side about the situation, this is when Jesse actually barges into the room during their conversation in the present day and tells Justice in full detail that it was actually Homura who did it, and he comes up with the line that Homura seduced Creed in order to kill him, which isn't too unbelievable because of the fact that it was very obvious that Creed had a strong crush on Homura since the moment the two of them met. So it's understandable that Justice would be kind of fooled by this, but still you can tell that Victor is not buying any of it. And I'm hoping that in the future, when Justice does eventually confront Homura over Creed's death, that Victor is there, because that's actually going to be a very interesting scene and a crucial turning point for Justice's character. Because as of right now, the character that Justice is, he's kind of like Shiki, where he would believe his friends over anything, even when his friends are contradicting each other as they are right now. And because of the fact that Jesse is part of his crew and someone that he trusts as a friend, he instantly believes the fact that Homura was the one that killed Creed. And as we saw during the Foressa arc, once Justice makes up his mind about someone, he doesn't really change it, no matter what. So it's going to be interesting to see whether or not once Victor proves to him that Homura was not the one that killed Creed, if he's going to change his mind about that, or if he's just going to still continue to try to kill her and hunt her down. And speaking of Homura, we actually cut over to her, Shiki, Pino, Klein, and Jin, and they're talking on the beach on planet Sandra, and we actually have Shiki asking Homura why they sent Creed's body back to the Unit Army instead of Wado, their home planet. And she says it's because of something that Witch said to her once, which is that everyone on the ship is a family. And she said that because of that, she felt that sending Lord Seiji, as she calls him, back to the ship was truly returning to his family, not sending him back to Wado. Then Goodwin joins them, asking where Rebecca is, and they tell him that she's actually recovering on the ship right now, and we see a small panel of her with Happy, as we see that she's still suffering from the effects of the overuse of Cataleaper. And this is when they actually talk about the fact that all of them had lost friends during this last war, and Goodwin actually invites them to a ritual that they actually do every time someone dies on planet Sandra. And this ritual is essentially them lighting up lanterns and throwing them into the sky. And the reason why they do this is because in the Out Cosmos, when someone dies, it's considered them becoming a star. So they light up the lanterns and send them into the sky to represent the person they lost. And in the chapter, we actually get to see a good number of people lighting up a great number of lanterns to fill up the entire sky of the planet, or at least on the beach area that they're at currently. And we see that there's actually a lot of characters here. In fact, we actually see that little kid from the beginning of the arc that was actually working for the Imperial Army that Goodwin tried to convince to be a good guy, or at least be on their side instead. And that's pretty much all there is in the chapter. We see everyone, we see Homura, Pino, Shiki all lighting up lanterns to send them into the sky. And the chapter ends with Shiki basically saying to Witch's ghost, saying that they'll never forget her because from now on she'll always be in their hearts. And this is basically Shiki officially getting over the fact, not really getting over it, but coming to terms with the fact that Witch died in this past arc and being able to move forward from it. And yeah guys, that's pretty much all that happened in chapter 168, and honestly it was this last part with them lighting up the lanterns that really hit me hard and actually made me tear up and almost cry completely when I got to read the chapter. So I definitely wanted to talk about that just because of the fact that I believe this scene, not only in the way that Hiro draws it, because the artwork is beautiful itself, but just the message behind the scene is just so beautiful that it's definitely worth talking about and definitely worth reading. But yeah guys, that's pretty much all that happened in this week's chapter. Now, I would like to speculate on what's going on with the 3 remaining members of the OSG that we get introduced to in this chapter, but we have so little information on them that there's nothing really to speculate on besides possibly what their power sets are, and I already went over that in my spoiler video, so I don't really think it's worth going over right now until we get more information on them. The only other thing to really speculate on is what's going on with Holly, because obviously by the way she looked in this chapter, that she has some kind of connection to Dead End Crow, but like I said, we still have no information on exactly what that connection could be, so we're just going to wait till we end up finding out more information on that in the future. But that's it for the video guys, thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed. I'll try this upcoming Sunday, if I have time, to go over the spoilers for next week's chapter, so look forward to that video if I do manage to make it, and yeah, that's pretty much it. See you guys in the next one, peace out.